Hi guys, well today I'm going to show you how to turn this ugly algae infested tank into this absolute temple of an aquarium. So guys, I recently invested in a 3D printer and oh my god was it the best investment I've made for a very long time. So for this project, we're actually going to be 3D printing a statue from Skyrim. The one I chose was the statue of Nocturnal, but as you can see, I'll put this link down in the description below. There is a ton of statues here that this person has made. You could also get these from the Skyrim data files, but it was just handy to go on Thingiverse and find them all here. Now when putting any sort of statue decoration into your aquarium, make sure it is aquarium safe. For this I was using PLA plastic, which is made from cornstarch and is safe in aquariums, but eventually, as it is made from cornstarch, the beneficial bacteria will eventually eat it away, but that's over a decade or so. Now the program I used to print this was Cura. You may have saw the previous program at the start of this video was Prusa Slicer. I ended up going with Cura because I thought the scaffolding might be a little bit better to take off, but it was not. It was a nightmare and took me forever. Now this was before I had a nice little bench set up for my 3D printers, and this is on the floor, so not ideal, but it gets the job done. So right now the printer is making the brim around what will be eventually the print. I found with my artillery sidewinder, which is the printer I'm using, it really needs a brim to stop the print from slipping off. The heated mat alone does not seem to stick it, but oh well, it gets the job done this way. Now this entire print took about, it would have been about 24 hours. It was a very, very long time, and I'm so glad nothing went wrong with it because that would have been a nightmare. I ended up printing this at 20% infill. Now if you are putting it in an aquarium, I recommend either doing 0% infill and putting a hole in it, or 100% infill, otherwise it's gonna float. I knew this was gonna be the case, but I was a bit wary with this design and I wanted to have a bit of infill in there so it wasn't very delicate. So I went with 20%, which is what I usually do these builds with, and the floating was an absolute nightmare, so make sure you got a plan for that if you do plan to put some form of infill in that's not 0% or 100%. Now I'm not going to bore you with removing the scaffolding because that took hours, but here is the finished result. I didn't clean it up too much. I left the back pretty scruffy because, well, you're not going to see it and I honestly couldn't be bothered. So now to actually start on the tank. Now this tank is an absolute mess. There's algae everywhere. The plants aren't doing too good. It's just, it needs some work. It really does. So one of the main reasons I wanted to spruce up this tank is that Rosey, my pink betta, who I've had for probably about 2 or so years now, is nearing the end of her life. And in fact, at the moment of editing this right now, she passed away last night. This was taken maybe about a week ago, and I was starting to see the beginning signs of pine coning. So that being said, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do this after she passed away, to spare her the stress, or if I wanted to get it done beforehand so she got a chance to have a nice new tank for a couple of days, and I ended up starting on the latter. Now what I'm doing here is, although I quite like how duckweed looks, it can be an utter pain sometime. And in this tank it just flourishes and no light gets to the plants underneath, which is why a lot of them have got a bit of melt or they're just not looking fantastic. So what I'm doing is firstly taking out as much of that as possible, and for once I'm actually going to try and keep on top of that because I know that it'll just destroy my plants if I don't. So the next step is pull out as many of the plants as I can, which in this case was actually all of them. Sometimes when I'm doing these sort of rescapes I keep some of the plants in, but here, no, all had to go. I had to clean it all out, get rid of all that algae, and do a nice big water change. So here you can see I'm actually setting up a spare filter. This is mainly because the filter that's in this tank has always been a little bit temperamental and it doesn't seem to have that much flow. And as you can tell by all the algae, like it really needs some flow in this tank. So I set up the extra filter and it's done a magnificent job. So now there's 2 filters running in this tank. Now the little filter on top, the hang on the back filter, that is just a really cheap one from eBay. I think I picked it up for like $10-20. But it does the job and works perfectly. Especially with all the moss and filtration media in the back. So that whole back wall is just filtration media. It is crazy. So now let's get started on the water change. Now this is a Wallstrad tank, so underneath that layer of pebbles is dirt. So when doing water changes and gravel vacuuming, I have to be careful that I'm not actually taking up too much of that dirt, and I'm just getting the layer of dust that's in between the gravel. So the water change is now done. I'm just trying to scoop up any debris that was kicked up by that water. And there was a lot of it, and I'm doing a super terrible job. But I get there in the end. So remember how I said that 20% will float? Yeah, it floats. Even if I try to fill it up a little bit with water, no, it wasn't going to work. And I knew this was going to happen. So my original solution was to tie this statue to a rock. So I just got some regular sewing thread, wrapped it around the base of the statue, around the feet, and tried to tie it to a rock. I tried it with 2 different rocks. Couldn't quite get the look I wanted. I didn't have any super glue either, but because I wasn't totally liking the look on the rock, I didn't want to make it permanent at this stage, which is why I was aiming to go for the thread. But of course, when I did go to put it in the tank, I obviously didn't do it tight enough, as the statue still tried to float and ended up looking like a balloon tied down to a rock. And remember how I said I was worried about the statue being a bit delicate? Yeah, the bird's legs that are attached the ravens to the arms were so thin, I kept snapping them, but I got them tied down in the end. Alrighty, so for the second try, what I ended up doing is tying a rock to the base of the feet with some stronger rope. But obviously didn't do that very tight either, because the rock slipped out of the rope. So, in the heat of the moment, what did I work out how to do? Just wedge the statue feet under a massive rock, and that'll keep it down. I tried to bury her a little bit into the substrate, made her a little bit more stable, but essentially that massive rock is what's holding her down, and it did the job. So after giving the glass a quick clean, I put in some of the plants that were from this tank and from other tanks, mostly Java fern, just to give it some greenery and give Rosey something to swim around essentially and rest on. But of course, this was not the end, because what would one of my aquarium rebuild videos be without live fish? Please, live fish, sponsor me. Please. That would be awesome. Anyway, again, this live fish order had no live fish in it. This was purely plants. They had like 10 different types of stem plants, stem bunches essentially, for like $50. Free shipping, and I was like, alright, easy. This is a nice easy way to fill this tank full of plants and make it look really good without having to wait for the plants to grow in. This is what I ended up doing, and any spares I could move across to other tanks. It was a win-win for me. And the one thing I don't like about how Live Fish ships plants is they put them all in the same wrap, essentially. I worry about how many damaged leaves I get whenever they do this, but I mean, the plants are always healthy, so I can't complain too much. Just over this section, I've taken Rosey out of the tank and put her into this little measuring jug that I use for all my fish keeping things, just to make sure she's not going to get in the way and get harmed as I'm trying to shove these plants into the damn substrate. Now, if anyone knows what any of these plants are called, I think the only one I know is jungle val, which is that really long one. Please let me know in the comments, that would be awesome, but majority of these are all completely new for me, so I have no idea what they are, but they look spectacular. So I ended up taking the statue out for the rest of the planting. The massive rock that was keeping it down was sort of in the way, and I just wanted to get all the plants in and then I can work on putting the statue back in now that I know how it was going to go. Now some of these I removed the bindings, others I kept them in. Any of them that I wanted to look like a big bunch, I kept them tied up before putting them in the substrate. I made sure to loosen it a bit, I don't want it to constrict the roots or the growth or anything like that. And it should be fine. I've used these little weird metal tags in aquariums before without any rusting or corrosion or anything like that. So hopefully this works out okay. Now typically you would take these bindings off and put them in as separate stems, but I'm going for a really bushy look here with very minimal effort. And now to put the statue back in. So I was sort of making sure I knew how to put the rock on the legs to keep it down, and I just put it in the center there, put the rock down and sort of wedged it into place. And that was pretty much it. That was the tank essentially all done. Now any of the leftover plants I put into my other tanks. I had a lot of jungle val left, so I put a little bit into Puff's tank. Hopefully she doesn't completely eat it all, that would be good. If you hadn't seen the recent video where I remake Puff's tank to this, go check it out. It's a nice relaxing video and it's really easy to make a tank look nice, especially when you have a ton of Javafern. Now for some last minute cleanups. I've got to get all of this algae off the glass. I literally had to scratch it off, it was on there pretty damn hard. And now, let's see if Rosey likes her new tank. Welcome to paradise, little one. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope that it inspired you to make your own tank like this. I actually took inspiration from the Lost World designed by the Sinscaper. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I will link that video down in the description below. He is an amazing aquascaper, you should definitely check him out. Now sadly, Rosey passed away a couple of days after this, but I'm glad she got to spend her last days in absolute paradise. She was such a sweet, gorgeous, and friendly little girl, and definitely one of my favourite bettas I've ever had, which is very unexpected because I never thought I would fall in love with a pink betta, but here we are. Swim in peace, Rosey. I hope you enjoyed your tank as much as I enjoyed having you. And now let me show you what this tank looks like today, the day of editing, the day after Rosey passed away. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next Friday.